Throughout our study of Shakespeare's plays, I have realized how directly they reflect the practices of the culture at that time. One of the practices that's the most distinct is how leaders craft a certain image for themselves. This is particularly evident when examining King Henry V and Queen Elizabeth. The same effort that Shakespeare put into crafting Henry's image was doubly put into crafting Elizabeth's. According to Greenblatt, Elizabeth was a ruler without a standing army, without a highly developed bureaucracy, without an extensive police force, a ruler whose power is constituted in theatrical celebrations of royal glory and theatrical violence visited among the enemies of that glory. Because Elizabeth did not necessarily have the physical means to back up her power, she and her court had to embellish her authority and create a rather unrealistic image of who she was. The power of her image depends upon its privileged visibility. As in theater, the audience must be powerfully engaged by this visible presence and at the same time held at a respectful distance from it. The more people were involved and felt as if they knew the personality and life of the monarch, at least in Elizabeth's case, the more the people liked their ruler. But what they were not supposed to realize was how tightly their view into the monarch's life was monitored. Only those things which would strengthen the people's perception of the Queen were publicized. When looking at portraits of Elizabeth, there is an obvious progression from her image as a princess to how she is portrayed as the Queen. The first image shows Elizabeth as a princess, and her image is very simple and modest, although she is still elegant enough to be set apart as royalty. Henry is also seen in his youth in King Henry IV, Part 1, in a much different way than he is as a king. Shakespeare goes as far as to portray him as rebellious and somewhat wayward, then changes his image dramatically as he gets closer to becoming king. This second image shows Elizabeth during a time of political and religious tension, but she is aligned with peace and plenty. So even in this time of tension, she is made to appear like the peacemaker and one who is avoiding conflict. Henry plays a similar role in the war with France, and although he does not prevent the war, he successfully shifts the blame to the other characters involved. This protects his image and credibility with his people and with the audience as he distances himself from the decision to go to war. The Armada portrait is a celebration of the English victory over the Spanish Armada. Elizabeth is the focus and in the center of the image, while the battle is depicted off in the background. This shows Elizabeth as the leader of this victory, but still distances her from the violence of war. Shakespeare portrays Henry similarly, particularly with the Battle of Agincourt. Even though it is extremely gruesome and bloody, his victory still justifies all of it in the end, and he comes out as a hero. The fourth image, known as the Ditchley portrait, shows Elizabeth standing on a map of Europe. She is also controlling the weather, and is depicted as an angelic, godlike being. Shakespeare creates a similar image with his portrayal of Henry as the heroic king of England, particularly after the victory over France. In the rainbow portrait, Elizabeth is again controlling the weather, holding a rainbow in her hand. The phrase in the portrait translates, "No rainbow without sun." Her dress is also covered in eyes, which is meant to imply that she sees everything through her servants. This reflects a similar event in Henry V, where the king disguises himself and goes into the camp to see what his men really think about him and the war. Throughout both of their lives, the images of these rulers were given constant attention. Although it was less intentional when they were young, they both developed into powerful leaders with credible images. These images of Elizabeth provided a visual representation for the abstract characteristics of the society that were seen in Shakespeare's plays.